Sorry, my thing took a weird, there we go. All right, so today we're looking through the lens of curiosity, and we're talking about the fact that curiosity can lead to awe of God. And so we need curiosity in order to accept that invitation that we heard in Proverbs 2. The invitation to turn our ear towards wisdom, to cry aloud for understanding, to dig for the wisdom like it is buried treasure. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about wonder. Wonder helps we notice and we come up with these questions, and then curiosity leads us to dig to the answer to the questions that we have. So wonder and curiosity are kind of intertwined. They're very connected. And when it comes to God, wonder leads us to ask questions about God and our faith, and curiosity then leads us to search for answers to our questions. And with God, when we find those answers, it always astounds us. We find that God defies our human understanding and exceeds our human limitations, and so we tend to be surprised by what we find when we look. And that is what inspires awe in us. We recognize that God is God, and we are not. We recognize our place, and also, so curiosity requires humility. All right, well, I thought I had, is there a picture of a wall up there? Oh, that was the wall, sorry. All right, so John Maxwell, who you might know, he does a lot of Christian writing, but mostly focused on leadership. And he shares this story about curiosity. Maxwell vividly remembers one of his teachers telling the story of 3 young boys who every day on their walk, as they would walk to school, would walk alongside a very high wall. And every day as the boys walked to school, they wondered what was on the other side of that wall. Well, finally, all that wondering led to enough curiosity, and it grew so strong that one of the boys says, "Let's find out." And so he threw his cap over the top of the wall. He goes, "Well, now I guess I have to climb over to the other side to get my cap." Well, the other 2 boys kind of looked at him in disbelief. But then as they watched him begin to climb the wall, they took off their caps and threw them over as well. They didn't want to be left behind. They wanted to experience the discovery for themselves and not just hear about it secondhand. So every day as they walked, they wondered, until curiosity overtook one of them and caused them to act. The curiosity of the other 2 then led them to follow. That's what wonder does. It creates this curiosity which leads us to search for wisdom, in their case, to see what was on the other side of the wall. The Greek philosopher Socrates said, "Wonder is the beginning of wisdom." So he even confirms that. It's been known for a long time. Wonder can be triggered by a mystery, but it can also be a feeling of surprise when the mystery is bigger than we expect it to be. Wonder can lead to a desire to understand the world and for us to ask questions. Wonder is a feeling of amazement and admiration. It's a state that's hard to define, though, but it's connected to feelings of empathy and imagination. And wonder then opens up a door of possibilities. Curiosity, then, is a desire to learn more about something or to find the answer to our question. The answer to the question of something we're wondering about. So it requires active engagement. We have to do something. It triggers interest, our interest and our attention, and curiosity leads us to learn something new and to fill a gap in our knowledge. And then when it comes to God, wonder and curiosity both lead us to awe. Awe at how God exceeds our human limitations and expectations. He is so much more than we can't fully comprehend. Well, we started off with the quote from Meister Eckhart this morning, his invitation to be willing to be a beginner every single morning. That invites us to assume the posture of a child. Have you ever noticed children are full of curiosity? Spend some time with a young child, or you can just turn back and look at Cora. It often inspires awe and delight in us. Children have this natural gift for exploring and wondering, for wanting to know, and for looking for answers. For them, everything is new and exciting. And once they learn to talk, they're full of questions, aren't they? They ask question after question after question. I know my oldest, when she was young, was, why? You'd answer and it'd be another why. It just kept going nonstop. Well, my husband, Daryl, who's the associate pastor, we were both engineers in our previous life. And while he was still working as an engineer, attended a professional training. And there they taught him that you have to ask a person a question 5 times to get to the answer, the real answer. So he did a lot of time studies and trying to improve flow in factories and that. So you go over, ask the person that was doing the job why they did it that way, and they would give you an answer. But you had to repeat it, and they would go a little bit deeper, and you would ask it again and again. And finally, after the 5th time, you would get the real motivation behind why they did it that way. That implies in other things as well. 5 times to get to the real answer, the deep answer. Take that home with you. I've used it before. It came from professional trainers, it's proven. But children seem to know that naturally, right? We don't have to keep asking the why. They do the 5 whys. But somewhere in our growing up, we lose our curiosity. We become convinced that curiosity is a sign of weakness. We limit curiosity to the experience that children have. But as we get older, we don't think we need to be so curious. Children don't know they want to know, but we think it's a sign of weakness, so we quit being curious. It seems like we're wasting our time. It feels like being curious makes us seem less deserving of being given a power of authority. And so we ease into certainty. We want to know, we want to believe. We don't want to be curious. In the church, we've been conditioned to value that certainty. We need to know what we know and believe what we believe and know why we believe it. Being certain about our faith gives us the appearance of being closer to God. Being certain means we are not at risk of doubting our core values and the teachings that define who we are and who the church community is. We think we need this certainty to survive, but actually certainty puts us on a pedestal, and we all know that you can fall from those. Curiosity is really ours to keep. Someone may challenge us on what we believe, but curiosity allows us to refine our understanding rather than having our faith shattered. Proverbs 2 is clear that curiosity is necessary for us. It says to understand the awe of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. That comes through curiosity, because curiosity keeps us searching, keeps us learning, and keeps us moving forward. Walt Disney, while he was still alive, was talking about his company. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Curiosity keeps us moving forward and down new paths. You know, that allows us to do the same in so many other things, and that's the same for our faith. Curiosity keeps us growing in our faith. So Jesus gave us instructions on our relationship with God. Jesus says that 3 things are necessary: ask, seek, knock. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. All three of those things, the asking, the seeking, the knocking, they all require curiosity. Knowing how to ask a question, being willing to seek and go up for the answer, and being courageous enough to voice your willingness to enter new places. Jesus says that humans do this for their children, so how much more willing would our Heavenly Father be? We attain what we get by adopting an attitude of curiosity. Jesus showed curiosity as well. He asked a lot of questions. He asked questions of a lot of people. The Gospels record more than 300. They include, what do you want? Who touched me? Do you love me? What good is it for a man to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul? And obviously the list goes on and on. Jesus was curious, and so he asked people questions so that he could learn. He asked questions that he had during conversations, often with the most unexpected people. Jesus saw a guy up in a tree, and he became curious, so Jesus said, "What are you doing up there?" And Jesus wanted to know more, so he invited himself to the man's house. When Jesus saw a woman at the well at midday, which was not the common practice, he thought that was strange. So Jesus asked her, "What are you doing here?" Jesus was curious about what her story was and why she was no longer married. And Jesus just wasn't being nosy and wanting to get the gossip. Jesus wanted to know more because he knows that interaction brings transformation. When Jesus inquires, something is about to happen to you. Try to imagine what it would be like to have Jesus start a conversation with you. What question might he ask you? And Jesus kept doing this all the way up to the very end. Jesus is on the cross. He had the two criminals on either side of him. And they started a conversation. And it ended up with one of them being promised that he would be with Jesus in paradise. You never know where a conversation will lead you. But curiosity is a door to the holy. Albert Einstein said, "Never lose your holy curiosity." Never lose your holy curiosity. Have you ever thought of curiosity that way, as being holy? We think we have to know the answers, but really curiosity is holy because it draws us to the holy. Our reading from Proverbs 2 reminds us to dig for insight and wisdom like someone digs for buried treasure. Never stop your holy digging. Curiosity and seeking can keep us digging and going even deeper, and they help to grow our faith. And it all comes from being curious. So never quit being curious. It's not something we're supposed to outgrow. Never stop asking questions, and never quit seeking. Never stop being curious, always be a seeker. James chapter 1, verse 5 says, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God." Be curious. "Who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." It points us right back to that ask, seek, knock thing, doesn't it? God never holds not being wise against us. God doesn't expect that, but he does expect us to ask. He expects us to be a seeker of wisdom. A seeker has a restless mind. They're agitated by curiosity. They ask questions. They want to know the world, and they want to be transformed. In other words, we want to be changed and grow deeper. And the big thing, a seeker never gives up. They continue to seek until they find the answer that they're looking for. So it's not a ask a question, get an answer. Some of these are long-term things, especially the hard ones. And Christians should be seekers because Christians are followers of Christ, and so we should want to learn all that we can about Jesus which is not something we're going to attain in this lifetime. We should always have questions. And we should be asking questions about what Jesus taught in all the stories in the Bible. We should be curious about Jesus, which means we need to ask questions. So what questions do you have about Jesus? And if you've got questions, you should be seeking the answers. We want to better understand people that we care about. We want to deepen our relationship, and we do that by asking questions and seeking answers. That's what Jesus did. And if it was good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for us. So what questions should you be asking either Jesus or other people? Is there a story in the Bible that raises a question for you? Or which question that Jesus asked causes you to wonder? If Jesus were to ask you that, what would you say in response? And which of Jesus' conversations leaves you with a question that you would like to add to your conversation with Jesus? That question to that person could be a question to you that you have a conversation with Jesus about. So the question that comes to your mind is a good place to start your curiosity. You're saying, but okay, I've got this question, I know what it is, but where do I start? Well, a good place to always start is God's Word, the Bible. It's always a good place to start. So if you have a question about the story, read that story again, and not just once quickly, but slowly and several times, and maybe over a period of time. If your question's about if the question you have is a question that Jesus asked someone, read the story where he asked the question carefully, slowly, over time. Are there hints in that story that lead to an answer to your question? If your question comes from a conversation that Jesus had, obviously read that story. Read it slowly, because slowly is always better. Reading it more than once will more likely provide an answer. Jesus isn't like God's not like a light switch where you ask a question, you flip the switch, and you instantly have an answer. So you've done that, you go, okay, well I'm not there yet, so what do I do next? Well, after you do that, take your question to Jesus in prayer. And then sit in quiet and listen for an answer. Don't rush it. I always recommend going to the Bible first, because oftentimes the answer that you hear when you get into that quiet time, it's going to come out of what you've read. You've read it enough that the answer from the scripture comes into your head and gives you your answer. And sometimes your answer isn't going to be a clear-cut answer. It can be a question. It's a question to shift your seeking in a different direction. Sometimes you're heading one way, and it needs shifted some, and you'll get another question as an answer. You know, there are times when we ask, we seek, we knock, we're doing all we're supposed to do, and the answer just doesn't come. At least not on our time schedule. Sometimes we have to continue to ask and to patiently wait. But that doesn't mean we just sit back and do nothing and wait for the answer to magically come. We have to continue to seek while we wait. The most important thing is that we need to keep seeking God. Stay curious, keep seeking. After all, isn't finding God better than finding the answer to the question that you're seeking anyway? Or as author Mark Batterson said, if you seek answers, you won't find them. But if you seek God, the answers will find you. Don't you love that? If you seek answers, you won't find them. But if you seek God, the answers will find you. So when you find your answer, you should find awe as well. The answer to every question we ask points us to God. And the answer often points us to God's glory, and that's when we feel awed. Sometimes we don't ask because we want to make sure that we're asking the right question. Have you ever said, oh, I can't ask that question, that's not a good one, or that's not where we're going? But there's no wrong answer. I used to teach, and I always tell my student, the only question that's the wrong question is the one that you don't ask. And the question isn't the most important thing anyway. And you might be thinking, well, then what is it? It's the fact that you are asking the question. We find answers in the conversations that Jesus had with people. Jesus asked people questions because Jesus wanted to get them to know them better, to have a deeper relationship with them. When we have questions and we take them to Jesus, we're doing the same thing. We take them to Jesus so that we can have a deeper relationship with Jesus. So any question that we bring to Jesus is going to take us one step closer to Jesus. So the question isn't important. It's not like, oh, well, this isn't the end of the world. Sometimes a really minor question can have a major change in your relationship with Jesus. So 32 years ago, I was 8 months pregnant with our second daughter. Only I didn't know what her gender was. And so during worship one Sunday morning, before I was a pastor, I was praying and I asked Jesus a question. I asked God whether I was going to have a boy or a girl. Okay, not the world's most important question, right? These people are lifting up things way more important than me. But that morning there was this arrangement that we always had 10 carnations on the altar. We had a florist in the congregation. 10 carnations. That morning, all 10 of them were white. And so as I'm praying, at that moment, one of the carnations was pink. I knew I was going to have a girl. Well, in the course of things, that answer really wasn't that important, right? I was going to find out in less than a month when I gave birth that she was a girl. And the answer really didn't change anything in my life. But that morning, I knew I was going to have a girl. I believed God. I trusted Him to give me the answer. But bigger than that, it really deepened my relationship with God. And it wasn't the fact that I knew the gender. It was the fact that I knew that God cared enough about my question to hear that insignificant prayer. And that was a start of a personal relationship with Jesus for me. That was the important part of that prayer. Not the answer to my question, but the answer of really wanting to know Jesus more. And that has had an ongoing effect on my life, and that is why I'm here today. That is the point of asking questions. When you ask questions, it gives Jesus the chance to let you know that He hears, that He cares, that He loves you, and that He wants a relationship with you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. You never know where it might lead.